Is Iran past the point of being able to stop them from getting a nuclear weapon?
At what stage will the White House decide that Iran has passed the no point of return? We have enough enriched uranium, they have heavy water, they have the know-how. So when do you decide that we have to enact Plan B?
I'm not fixing a date on that. Obviously, we closely monitor the progress in Iran's nuclear program. We are alarmed and concerned by the steps that they have taken since they left the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. Within the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, there were constraints on that program that were significant and substantial. We had a lid on that program. Now we do not, because we don't have that deal. So our first and highest priority is to get back to the table and get back to a deal that does, in fact, place a lid on Iran's nuclear program.
These Iran talks, which are starting next month, which, it's probably towards the end of next month. They haven't released the schedule yet. But what we know is that the U.S. is not technically going to be a part of that because we withdrew from the group behind the JCPOA, or the Iran nuclear deal. But Iran wants to move forward.
Here's the most disturbing thing that's come about lately. We've discovered that they have one facility that is doing research and development on shockwave generators. Shockwave generators have one purpose, and that is to miniaturize a nuclear weapon so you can put it on the tip of a missile. We know they're doing that. They've also, of course, researched development on ballistic missiles and have the capability to deliver the weapon once they have the weapon. And so all of this is a break from reality to think that Iran will somehow discard the progress they've made if we'll only lift the sanctions and give them what they're asking for.
What do you think the Biden administration does to go get ahead of this? Because it seems like to me the world is saying, well, and this kind of looking at how America's wielding its power around the world, saying, well, we don't have to wait for the Americans anymore. We can move forward with a plan like this. Secondhand, though, I'm also concerned about what we might be willing to give up just to get back into these discussions.
When they tried to do that during the Trump administration, we put enormous sanctions on them. We made sure that the Chinese and the Russians couldn't trade with the Iranians either. Remember, the P5 is made up of 3 European countries, but also 2 true adversaries of the United States of America. When Secretary Blinken testified in his hearing and others, they said we would do a deal, but it would be longer, stronger, and better than the 2005 JCPOA. There is no chance the Iranians are re-entering these discussions thinking they're going to end up with deeper commitments. Remember, many of those commitments from 2015 have already expired, including the capacity for the Iranians to sell weapon systems, to go back into that same deal, which is what the Biden administration has told the world they're prepared to do. Iran will be on its path to a nuclear weapon in just a handful of years. This would be tragic for the Abraham Accords, tragic for the region, and really bad for the United States.
You've got to answer this with tougher sanctions. That's how you answer these threats without using military force is sanction. Cut them off from the world's economy, cripple the economy. We've seen it work time and time again with Iran. That's not where the Biden team is. Take a listen to Robert Malley. They're the exact opposite. I mean, you could not be more diametrically opposed in your foreign policy.
We are prepared to remove all of the sanctions that were imposed by the Trump administration that were inconsistent with the deal, and therefore we could get back to the business that we should have been on.
12 days later, Iran announces, okay, we're willing to come back to the negotiating table. That is no surprise at all. There's a flawed strategy here. The Biden administration is negotiating from a position of weakness, not strength. And the real commitment should be at whatever it costs. We will not allow Iran to acquire a nuclear weapon.
That's what they're telling the world before Iran's even agreed to allow the U.S. back into this negotiation or allow the U.S. to be part of this. That all the sanctions that are inconsistent, which they get to then define, we will lift. You're giving away so much, Wes, before you've even gotten back into the room. Which I think you should just do the sanctions and not get back into the room.
If Iran gets a nuclear weapon, it should be despite the efforts of the United States, not because we helped them or, by default allowed it to happen. And that seems to be where we're going. It's very alarming.
The head of the UN nuclear watchdog said that they can no longer monitor Iran. It's not intact. They didn't repair. I mean, this is how ridiculous it gets, Wes. They didn't repair the cameras that the UN could use to monitor one of the key facilities where they enriched uranium. And the Iranians just said, all right, we're not going to repair these cameras. They broke. And they said they could never then figure out, you can't reconstruct what was going on.
The Biden administration either thinks this is inevitable or unavoidable, and that they're going along with this knowing that in the end, they're going to acquire a nuclear weapon. That's why Malley's statement earlier was so disturbing to me, because that is not the case. We can still prevent them from getting a weapon, but you have to be willing to do it and to take a tough stance and, if need be, increase the sanctions and, Jordan, walk away from the table.
If they continue down a path towards a nuclear weapon, the United States will fold, simply acknowledge that they're a weapon state, and try to manage the risk from there. That is really dangerous. The Israeli leadership knows this. The Saudi leadership knows this. The Emirati leadership knows this. And some group of them, I am confident, will do all they can to make sure that Iran never gets a nuclear capability they can deliver.
Why make it easier for them to get a nuclear weapon instead of heavy sanctions? This is a terror state. This is a threat to the United States. It's a threat to our allies. It's not just about Israel. It is also about the Gulf states. And do we want to see a nuclear arms race in the Middle East?